Elena was 17 years old when she first understood that life was not going to wait for her dreams. She was a quiet girl with soft eyes and tired hands, living in a small apartment with her mother and younger brother. Their home was safe, but money was always tight, and every bill felt like a reminder that childhood had ended early for her. Most mornings, she woke up before the sun rose. She would lie still for a moment and listen to the slow breathing of her brother in the next room, the gentle hum of the old refrigerator, and the distant traffic outside. Then she would get up, tie her hair back, and start the day. She moved carefully, trying not to wake her family. There was comfort in these routines, even when they were difficult. She would make her brother's lunch, pack her own things, and check the time again and again, hoping she wasn't already late. Elena loved music more than anything else in the world. When she was younger, she used to take piano lessons from an elderly neighbor who lived across the street. That neighbor had moved away, and the lessons had ended years ago, but the memory stayed like a light she could feel even in the darkest moments. She had not touched a real piano in a long time, and sometimes she wondered if her fingers still remembered. On the hardest days, she hummed music under her breath because it felt like the only thing she could still control. After school, Elena worked at a hotel restaurant not far from the center of the city. It was a place where people came to celebrate special occasions, to host meetings, or to show off their status. The hotel hallways always smelled like polished wood and expensive perfume. The large windows reflected chandeliers and painted a world that seemed perfect, at least on the surface. Elena often thought that the hotel looked like a movie set, and she felt like she was playing a background character whose name would never appear in the credits. She wore a uniform that didn't quite fit her, the sleeves a little too long and the fabric a little too stiff. She rolled up the sleeves when the manager wasn't watching. If he saw her, he would tell her to roll them back down. There were rules for everything in that place. Rules for how to hold a tray, how to speak to a customer, how to fold a napkin, how to smile. It was strange how smiling could feel like work when it wasn't real. The guests at the hotel were often people from another world. They wore clothes that shimmered, and their shoes never had scratches or worn-out soles. They talked loudly and confidently about weekend trips to islands Elena had never heard of, about businesses they owned, about artists they had met. They sipped drinks slowly, like time was their friend, not something that chased them. Elena admired them from a distance but didn't envy them. She didn't wish to have their expensive things. She only wished for the freedom to dream without feeling guilty about it. Every time she carried plates from table to table, her mind drifted to music. She imagined her hands moving across piano keys. She imagined the sound of the notes flowing smoothly, like water over stones. In her mind, she could hear entire compositions, even if she wasn't sure how to play them anymore. Sometimes, when the restaurant was nearly empty, she would pause near the grand piano in the corner of the dining hall. It was a beautiful instrument, polished to a shine so clear she could see her reflection in it. She wondered how many songs were trapped inside it, just waiting to be played. She wanted to touch it, just once, even if only to feel the cool ivory keys under her fingertips. But she never did. She was afraid someone would see and misunderstand, or worse, tell her she didn't belong there. Her coworkers were a mixed group. Some were friendly and shared snacks with her during breaks. Others only talked when the manager was nearby, trying to impress him. Elena didn't say much. She preferred listening. Listening was safer, and it taught her more. She learned which regular guests tipped well, which ones complained no matter what, and which ones would look at her like she was invisible. She did not take it personally anymore. People carried their own stories, and sometimes those stories made them unkind. Elena's mother worked long hours too, cleaning offices across town. She came home late, with sore feet and a tired smile. They rarely had long conversations, not because they didn't care, but because exhaustion often spoke louder than words. But whenever Elena mentioned music, her mother's eyes softened. She would say, "One day things will get better." Elena wanted to believe that. She needed to believe that. Even though her life was busy and tiring, Elena tried to find moments of beauty. On the bus ride home, she would lean her head against the window and look at the city lights. She imagined each light as a piano note floating in the air. She created tiny stories in her head, stories where she performed in front of an audience, where people listened because they wanted to, not because they had to. In these stories, she never stumbled. Her hands never shook. Her voice never failed her. Music was the one place where fear could not follow her. Still, doubts lived inside her. They whispered when she tried to sleep. They told her she was foolish to think she could ever be more than a waitress. They reminded her that dreams cost money and time, and she had neither. She felt the weight of responsibility every day. If she made a mistake at work, her paycheck suffered. If the electricity bill was high, she felt guilty for turning on the lights too long. If her brother needed something for school, she wondered how they would manage. These thoughts sat on her shoulders like heavy stones. Despite everything, Elena refused to let go of the part of her that still believed. She didn't know how to explain it, but music felt like breathing. It didn't matter if she had an audience or if she played in an empty room. What mattered was the feeling, that moment when a note connected to another note, when a melody began to form, and suddenly the world felt less overwhelming. She missed that feeling more than anything. Sometimes, after her shift, when everyone else had left, she would pause before going home. The lights would be dim, the dining room quiet. She would stand near the piano and imagine she was brave enough to sit on the bench and play. She wondered if the sound would fill the room or if it would come out weak and uncertain. She wondered if she still had the ability to make people feel something through music. She wanted to find out, but her fear of failing held her back. There were days when the hotel felt like a cage, and the piano felt like the key she was afraid to use. She didn't hate her job. She was grateful for it. But sometimes, gratitude wasn't enough to silence the ache of what she truly wanted. Elena believed that music could change things. She believed it could change people. She believed it could change her life, too, even if she didn't know how yet. She carried that belief like a secret flame, protected from the wind of reality. She hoped that one day, the flame would grow strong enough to light the path forward. For now, she kept moving. She worked. She saved whatever money she could. She practiced finger movements on her own hands when no one was looking, muscle memory trying to keep its place in her life. She listened to piano recordings on her phone when she washed dishes or folded napkins. Every note was a reminder of why she kept going. She didn't know what would happen next, but she felt, deep inside, that her story was not finished. It was only waiting for the right moment to begin again. And even though she was scared, she stayed ready. Because sometimes, even in the quietest life, something extraordinary can be hiding just around the corner. People often said the hotel was the heart of the city, but to Elena, it felt more like a different planet. Every time she stepped through the revolving glass doors, she crossed from her world into theirs. The lobby glowed with warm lights that never flickered. The floors were so polished that Elena could see her reflection looking back at her. The image of a girl who still felt like she didn't belong. The hotel restaurant was where she spent most of her time. It was the kind of place where someone always seemed to be celebrating something. Birthdays, promotions, anniversaries, business deals, reunions. It was like every table had its own story, and most of those stories revolved around success. Not the kind of success Elena knew, the kind that felt like hard work and survival, but a success that looked effortless, glossy, and distant. Every evening when she tied her apron and smoothed her uniform, she prepared herself for the performance of serving. It wasn't just a job, it was like acting. She learned to speak gently, to smile at the right moments, to pretend she wasn't bothered when someone snapped their fingers or waved her over without looking at her. She learned to keep her voice steady even when a customer sighed dramatically like she was wasting their time just by existing. Her manager, a tall man with slick hair and a stern voice, reminded her constantly that the guests were the hotel's priority. He would say, "They don't come here to see mistakes." And Elena understood what he meant. Mistakes were not allowed in this world. Mistakes made you visible, and being visible could be dangerous if you didn't shine the right way. The guests arrived like they owned the place because in a way they did. Their money, their status, their expectations shaped the air. They walked in wearing tailored suits and dresses that flowed when they moved. They ordered dishes without looking at the menu, like they already had the world memorized. They talked about last-minute flights to other countries as if flying was as simple as catching a bus. They talked about things Elena had never experienced. Boutique art galleries, private schools, vacations on islands where the water was so clear it looked fake. They talked about charity galas where tickets cost more than Elena earned in a month. They talked about musicians they had hired for private events, pianists who played in rooms filled with people who could afford to hear them live whenever they wanted. Sometimes their voices dripped with boredom, like even luxury could get old. Elena found that strange. She couldn't imagine getting tired of comfort. But maybe comfort felt different when you didn't have to fight for it. There was a group of regular guests who came in every week. They were always dressed perfectly, like they had stepped out of a magazine. They were friendly, not in a warm way, but in a polite way that kept distance. They looked at Elena like they were seeing her through glass. She wondered if they ever imagined the lives of the people serving them. Once, when Elena placed a tray of drinks on their table, she overheard them talking about a music festival they had attended. They described watching a world-famous pianist perform under golden stage lights. Elena slowed her steps, listening without meaning to. She imagined the stage, the audience, the sound of applause echoing like waves. Her heart ached, not with jealousy, but with longing. She wanted to know what it felt like to sit at a piano and play without fear. There was one guest in particular, an older woman with silver hair and soft perfume, who always sat near the grand piano. She came alone, ordered tea, and watched the room with thoughtful eyes. She seemed different from the others. Not louder, not richer, but quieter, like she carried her own world inside her. Elena wasn't sure why, but she felt drawn to her. The woman never asked for anything special, and she always said thank you in a way that made Elena feel like a person, not a uniform. One evening, when the restaurant was buzzing with customers, the woman waved Elena over. She pointed to the piano and said, "Such a beautiful instrument, isn't it?" Elena nodded, careful with her words. She didn't want to say too much. She didn't want to seem foolish. The woman continued, "I imagine it waits for someone to wake it up." Elena felt a shiver run through her, like the woman had spoken to a part of her she thought no one could see. The hotel staff didn't understand why Elena liked being near the piano so much. Some teased her gently. Others warned her that the manager might think she was wasting time. But Elena couldn't help it. The piano was the one object in that place that made her believe there was room for dreams, even in a world where she felt small. There was a pianist who performed at the hotel twice a week, a man named Raphael. He was known for his calm presence and his ability to play without ever seeming to try. His music floated across the dining room like something magical. Elena admired him from a distance. She watched how his fingers moved, how he breathed with the music, how he seemed to talk to the piano without saying a word. Raphael noticed Elena too, not in a romantic way but in a way that recognized something familiar. One night, after his performance ended and the room was nearly empty, he found Elena wiping down tables. "You like music," he said. Elena froze, unsure how to respond. She nodded slowly. "You listen like someone who knows," he said again, packing his sheet music into a worn leather bag. His tone wasn't arrogant. It was kind. "Do you play?" Elena hesitated. She almost said no. It was easier to pretend she didn't. But something inside her pushed her forward. "I used to," she admitted. Raphael smiled softly. "Music doesn't leave," he said, "even when you think it does." Before she could respond, he left, and Elena stood there, feeling like someone had just handed her a key she didn't know how to use. The next day, the manager posted a notice on the staff board. It read, "Piano to remain untouched by staff. Do not sit. Do not play. Do not attempt to use without authorization." Elena felt her heart drop. She didn't know if Raphael had said something to the manager or if it was just a coincidence, but the message felt personal. It felt like a door had been slammed before she could reach it. Still, the piano remained the center of the room. Even silent, it demanded attention. Guests gathered near it like it was a piece of art. They admired its design, commented on how expensive it must be, took photos beside it. Elena wanted to tell them that an instrument was more than its price tag. It was a voice, a heartbeat, a secret waiting to be shared. But she stayed quiet. She noticed things the guests didn't. She noticed the slight scratches near the pedals, signs that someone had once practiced hard there. She noticed the tiny chips in the keys, signs of songs that had been played passionately. She wondered if the piano missed being touched, the way she missed touching it. The restaurant's atmosphere could change depending on who walked in. Sometimes it felt light, filled with laughter and celebration. Other times it felt sharp, filled with pressure and competition. Elena learned to read the room like sheet music. She could tell when someone wanted attention and when someone wanted to be left alone. She could tell when a smile was real and when it was just another part of the performance. The wealthy guests, for all their glamour, often seemed just as uncertain as she was. Their conversations were filled with plans, expectations, and worries. They talked about success like it was something fragile, something they had to protect. They talked about failure like it was a ghost they were running from. Elena realized that money didn't erase fear. It just dressed it differently. Still, their world felt far away. She could watch it, but she couldn't touch it. She could serve it, but she couldn't enter it. The piano was the closest thing she had to a bridge between the two worlds. Every night, when Elena walked home, she replayed moments from the day. Not the mistakes or the rude customers or the heavy trays. She replayed the music, Raphael's melodies, the silver-haired woman's words, the sound of her own heartbeat when she imagined sitting at the piano bench again. She didn't tell her family about these moments. Not because she didn't trust them, but because she didn't know how to explain the way music lived inside her. It wasn't just a hobby. It was a language she had forgotten how to speak, but one she still understood in her bones. Life at the hotel taught her many things. How to move quickly without rushing. How to stand tall even when she felt small. How to hear dreams in the conversations of strangers. How to survive in a place that wasn't built for her. But most importantly, it taught her something she didn't expect. Just because a world isn't made for you, doesn't mean you can't find a place in it. Even if it takes time. Even if it takes courage. Even if it takes one unexpected moment to change everything. Elena didn't know it yet, but the world she served was about to see her. Not as a waitress, not as a background character, but as someone who could reshape the room with nothing but music. And the piano in the corner, silent and patient, was waiting for that moment too. The grand piano sat in the dining hall like a quiet king, holding its own space without ever needing to speak. Even when the room was full of chatter, clinking glasses, and the soft footsteps of servers, the piano remained the center of attention. It was impossible not to notice. The way the light fell across its polished surface made it shine like a piece of the moon had landed in the hotel. To the guests, it was a symbol of luxury. To the manager, it was a selling point. To the hired musicians, it was a tool. But to Elena, it was a memory. It was a heartbeat. It was everything she missed. Each day she stepped into the restaurant, she checked to see if it had moved, even though she knew it never would. A habit she couldn't shake. The piano stayed in the same spot, angled just right so anyone who played would face both the dining room and the entrance. It was positioned perfectly for applause, even if applause was rare. The hotel had a weekly schedule for performances. Some evenings were for jazz bands, other nights for classical solos. Most of the time, it was just soft piano music played to blend into the background like wallpaper for the ears. The manager said music created an atmosphere of wealth, a phrase Elena never quite understood. She didn't know wealth had a sound. One Thursday afternoon, as Elena polished wine glasses behind the bar, she overheard the manager on the phone. His voice was clipped and tight. "What do you mean you can't come? Tonight? Last minute?" He paused, rubbing his forehead. "No, I understand, but we have a full reservation list. We can't go without music tonight." Elena's heart tilted, curious. She tried not to stare, but her ears sharpened as if pulled by invisible strings. The restaurant's pianist, not Raphael this time, but another musician, had just canceled. It wasn't unusual, but it always put the staff on edge. The hotel relied on appearances, and nothing destroyed the illusion of perfection faster than silence. After hanging up the phone, the manager paced. The kind of pacing that made his expensive shoes snap against the tile like punctuation marks. Elena kept polishing, pretending not to notice him muttering to himself about finding a replacement. The clock ticked closer to the evening rush. Reservations were stacked, every table booked. People with high expectations were going to walk through the doors soon. And there would be no music to greet them. Elena felt something rise in her chest. A thought she tried to push down before it fully formed. Maybe she could. No. She stopped the idea before it got too loud. She was just a waitress. Just a girl who used to play. Just someone holding on to a dream like a story she wasn't sure she remembered correctly. A moment later, the manager approached her. Not because of her talent, he didn't know about that, but because stress made him look at whoever was closest. You, he said, pointing. Double-check table 9. The centerpiece is crooked. Fix it. His tone was sharp but not cruel. Just busy. Frustrated. Worried. Elena nodded. Yes, sir. She walked to table 9, straightened the flowers, adjusted the silverware, and then looked up. The piano was right there. Felt closer than usual, like it had been waiting. She took a breath, and for one wild second, she imagined herself sitting down at the bench, pressing a single key, letting it ring out like a declaration. Her fingers twitched. She rubbed them against her apron. What if she did? Just to help. Just so there wouldn't be silence. Music wasn't just luxury. Music was comfort. Music was magic. But what if she embarrassed herself? What if she wasn't as good as she remembered? What if she hit the wrong key and shattered the illusion the hotel worked so hard to build? The thought made her stomach twist. She stayed where she was. Later, during a short break, she slipped into the staff kitchen and leaned against the wall, eyes closed. She tried to imagine the keys under her fingers, the cool ivory, the way they pushed back just slightly before giving in. She tapped the air like a ghost piano was floating in front of her. A coworker named Yara noticed. Practicing piano in your head again? She asked with a gentle smile. Elena's eyes snapped open. Was it obvious? Yara laughed softly. Only because you do it every day. You kind of disappear when you do it. Elena felt her cheeks warm. I don't mean to. Don't apologize. It's nice. Means you care about something. Yara shrugged, picking up plates. Some people never find anything they care about that much. That sentence stayed with Elena longer than it should have. As the evening approached, guests began to arrive. The lobby filled with voices. Perfume trailed like invisible ribbons, and jackets rustled like pages being turned. Everything sounded normal, but something felt wrong. Without music, the room felt hollow. The first hour passed. The pianist never arrived. The manager's attempts to call replacements failed. The pressure in the air grew heavier. Then, something unexpected happened. A group of tourists, dressed more casually than usual guests, walked in near the piano. One of them, a young man, sat at the bench and pressed a few keys. Just testing. It sounded clumsy, like the piano was waking up from sleep. Before he could play more, the manager rushed over. No, 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 the manager said quickly, guiding him away without touching him. This is not open for public use. The tourist apologized, confused, and moved on. Elena watched from across the room, heart racing. She imagined the keys vibrating from the brief contact. She wondered if the piano was disappointed. After the tourists left, the manager turned to the staff. If anyone has suggestions, he said bitterly, now would be the time. There was silence. Everyone looked at each other. No one spoke. Elena swallowed. Her voice felt trapped in her throat, like it had to fight through layers of fear before reaching her mouth. She looked at the piano again, then back at the manager. She raised her hand a little, not high, not confident, just enough. I could try, she said. The words sounded tiny, like they were made of glass. The room didn't go silent, but it felt quieter. A few heads turned. The manager stared at her. You? He repeated, eyebrows lifting. You play. I used to, she answered. Her voice didn't shake, but her knees did. The manager blinked, processing. His expression was impossible to read. Then he shook his head. No, absolutely not. We cannot risk the hotel's reputation on. He gestured at her uniform. A staff experiment. Elena felt heat crawl up her neck. Not anger, humiliation. She nodded quickly, stepping back. Of course. I understand. Yara shot her a sympathetic look. A few other staff members pretended not to have heard. The manager walked away, already distracted by another problem, another detail to fix. Elena returned to work, but her chest felt heavy. She replayed the moment in her head, again and again, the courage it took just to ask, the way it had fallen flat. Maybe the manager was right. Maybe she wasn't ready. Maybe her dream was safer inside her imagination. Safer, yes, but dreams are not made to be safe. They are made to be lived. Near closing time, after the last table's finished dessert, Raphael arrived unexpectedly. His coat was damp from rain, hair slightly messy like he had rushed. Sorry I'm late, he said, approaching the manager. There was a problem with the bus routes. I must have mixed up the schedule. The manager looked relieved. It's fine. We managed. Just start something. As Raphael set up his music, he noticed Elena cleaning a nearby table. He smiled in greeting. You okay? He asked quietly. Elena nodded, but her eyes told another story. Raphael glanced at the piano, then back at her. You wanted to play, didn't you? She didn't reply, but that was answer enough. He paused, thinking. Then, without making a scene, he said something that took her breath away. You should practice. If this matters to you, don't wait for permission to start. His words weren't loud. They weren't dramatic, but they felt like he had handed her the missing key. Practice. Not perform. Not impress. Not prove. Just practice. Something she could do. Something she was allowed to do. That night, when the restaurant finally closed, and the staff clocked out one by one, Elena stayed an extra moment. Just long enough to glance at the piano. It was still shining. Still waiting. She didn't touch it. Not yet. But she didn't walk past it like before. This time she stopped. Let her hand hover over the keys. Close enough to feel the memory. Close enough to promise. Soon. Not today. But soon. The next few days passed like slow waves. Gentle on the surface but full of movement underneath. Every morning Elena woke up with a new thought living in her chest. An idea that felt like a seed. Maybe she wasn't ready to sit at the piano in front of people. Maybe she wasn't good enough yet. But she could try. She could start. The idea didn't scare her as much as before. Felt fragile but not impossible. At home, she cleared space on the kitchen table and spread out sheets of blank paper. She drew piano keys from memory, labeling them like she used to in lessons. Her brother watched curiously, chewing on a sandwich. What are you doing? He asked. Elena smiled softly. Studying, she said. She didn't want to promise anything she couldn't deliver. Not yet. Her brother nodded like it made perfect sense. Okay, he said. Then he added, I hope you become something. The comment was innocent. Not insulting. Not patronizing. Just honest. Elena felt the weight of those words not as pressure, but as hope. She reached over and squeezed his arm gently. I hope you do too, she replied. At school, she found her attention drifting. Her mind played invisible notes. She tapped rhythms on her desk with her fingertips. She memorized patterns of black and white keys, trying to rebuild skills she feared she had lost. At work, she was different now. Not confident, not yet, but grounded. Like she was slowly stepping into her own skin. She moved with more purpose. Her hands didn't tremble as much. Even when customers were demanding or impatient, she didn't shrink. She held her place. Something inside her had taken root, and it was growing. One evening, as she folded napkins near the bar, the manager's voice cut through the room. Attention, please, he called out. Staff members paused, turning toward him. He stood near the front desk, holding a clipboard like a shield. His expression was serious. Tonight is important, he said. We have a private booking. High-profile guests. They requested live music. He looked around. Unfortunately, our usual performer is unavailable. Elena felt her heartbeat quicken. She stared at the floor, afraid to hope. The manager continued, "We have contacted 3 replacements. None can come, so we must handle the evening carefully. Keep the service flawless. Keep the atmosphere calm. And most importantly, do not draw attention to the lack of piano music." He scanned the staff. "If anyone has ideas, now is the moment," he said again. But there was no curiosity in his voice this time, more like impatience. No one spoke. Elena's hands tingled. She knew this moment. She remembered the last time she tried. The sting of being dismissed like she was foolish for even asking. She stayed silent. The manager clapped his hands once. "All right, let's prepare. We open in 2 hours." Staff scattered, heading to their tasks. But before Elena could move, she felt a hand on her shoulder. It was Yara. "You should try again," Yara whispered. "This feels like a second chance." Elena let out a small breath. "I don't want to look stupid." "You won't," Yara replied. "Wanting something isn't stupid." The sentence hit harder than Elena expected. She walked toward the front desk where the manager stood. He was checking a stack of reservation cards, counting and recounting them like numbers might solve everything. Elena waited until he noticed her. When he looked up, she forced her voice to stay steady. "I would like to try," she said. "With the music. I don't want to embarrass the hotel. I just want to help." The manager sighed, dragging a hand through his hair. "We've been over this." "I know," Elena said quietly. "But I've been practicing. Not on the piano, just in my mind. On paper. I'm not asking for the whole evening. Maybe just one song. Or to test a few notes before the guests arrive." The manager's expression softened. Not kindly, but tiredly. He looked around, like he was checking if anyone else could save him from this choice. Finally, he spoke. "One attempt. Before the doors open. If it goes well, I will consider letting you play briefly. If not, you return to service and we never discuss this again." Elena nodded. Her throat was too tight for words. "One attempt," she repeated. Yara squeezed her elbow as she passed. "Breathe," she whispered. The dining hall was quiet. The chairs were arranged perfectly. The lights dimmed just enough to make the room glow. The grand piano waited. Elena approached the bench like it was a cliff's edge. She sat down carefully, adjusting her posture like she remembered from lessons. Back straight, shoulders relaxed, hands floating just above the keys. Her reflection stared back at her in the glossy surface. Same uniform, same face, but not the same girl. She placed her fingers down. The first note rang out, hesitant but clear. The piano felt colder than she expected. Heavier. The sound lifted into the empty room, echoing against the walls. She played another note, then another. A simple scale at first, then a basic chord progression, like testing the water before stepping in. Her fingers stumbled. She corrected. She breathed. Again. It started to come back. Not all at once, but in pieces, like finding old photographs in the attic and remembering who she used to be. She played a song she had learned as a child. Something gentle, something safe. It was not perfect, but it was alive. The manager watched from a distance, arms crossed, his face unreadable. When she reached the end of the melody, she let her hands fall to her lap. The silence that followed felt heavier than the music. The manager walked over. "Elena," he said. His voice wasn't sharp this time. It wasn't impressed either. It was considering. "You may play," he said finally. "Quietly. Background only. If guests complain, you stop." "Understood." Elena nodded. She wanted to cry, but she didn't. She held herself together like a song held by a single repeating note. "Thank you," she whispered. He turned and walked away, already onto the next problem. Elena sat alone at the piano for a moment longer. Her fingers trembled with the leftover adrenaline. She pressed one more key, a soft one, like sealing the decision. During the first hour of service, she played quietly. simple pieces, soft melodies that blended into the hum of the restaurant. Some guests didn't notice. Others nodded politely as they passed. The silver-haired woman from before returned, sitting in her usual chair near the piano. She sipped her tea and listened, really listened. When Elena finished a piece, the woman caught her eye and smiled. A slow, proud smile that felt like applause. But not everyone approved. A couple at table 6 requested that the music be lowered. Another group asked if someone more experienced would be playing later. The manager tensed each time someone mentioned it, ready to pull the plug. Elena felt the pressure like a hand on her back, pushing her closer to the edge. She tried to ignore it. She focused on the keys, on breathing, on remembering why she was doing this. Halfway through her third song, a mistake broke through. A wrong key, sharp and unexpected. It sliced through the air like a crack in glass. A few heads turned. Elena's heart dropped. Her instinct was to stop, to run, to apologize. But then she remembered Raphael's words. Music doesn't leave, even when you think it does. So she kept going. She smoothed the mistake into the rhythm, turning it into a small change instead of a failure. She played softer, then steadier, then fuller. Her hands remembered. Her heart remembered. By the end of the evening, no one was clapping. It wasn't that kind of moment, but something had shifted. She was no longer the girl who only dreamed. She was the girl who tried. As the last guests left, the manager approached her again. You did acceptable, he said. Not perfect, but acceptable. It wasn't praise, but it wasn't rejection. Elena, he added, hesitation in his tone. Come in early tomorrow. We should talk. She nodded. She packed up her sheet papers, stood, and placed her hand on the piano once more before leaving. This time, she wasn't afraid to touch it. As she walked home, the city lights seemed different. Not brighter, but reachable. Like stars no longer looked like things meant for other people. Like they were points she could trace, forming a map. The night felt like a doorway, and Elena was finally learning how to knock. The next morning, Elena arrived at the hotel earlier than she ever had before. The streets were still waking up, their usual noise softened to a dull murmur. The sky looked washed in pale colors, like it hadn't fully decided which shade of blue it wanted to be. Her breath formed little clouds in the air as she walked, and she hugged her coat tighter around her. She felt awake in a way that had nothing to do with sleep and everything to do with the piano waiting for her inside. The lobby lights glowed warmly when she stepped inside. The hotel was quiet, like a stage before the audience arrives. Only a few staff members were around, preparing breakfast trays and arranging flowers in tall vases. The grand piano sat in its usual place, waiting. Elena's heart beat in her throat as she walked toward the manager's office. She knocked, and his voice called her in. He sat at his desk, writing something on a clipboard. He didn't look up immediately. You're here, he said finally, putting the pen down. Good. Sit. Elena sat, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. She waited for whatever came next. You played yesterday, he said. His tone was not cold. Not warm either. Neutral. I allowed it because we had no other option. Today, I need to understand if that was a one-time situation or something we can use to our advantage. Elena frowned slightly. Use? She repeated softly, unsure if she liked the word. Yes, the manager continued. Music is part of our image. We sell an experience here, not just food. Your playing wasn't polished, but it helped. If you are going to continue, you will arrive early to practice. You will learn a set list. You will do this seriously. Understood. Elena nodded. I understand. Good, the manager said. If this works, it could be good for both of us. You get a chance. We fill a gap. But I need results. Not dreams. Results. The word stung. Just a little, but Elena nodded again. She wasn't here to argue. She was here to try. Start now, he said, waving her off. She stood and left the office, pulse racing. She wasn't sure if this was an opportunity or a test. Maybe it was both. As she approached the piano, she noticed someone sitting nearby, the silver-haired woman. She was already there with her tea, as if she had been waiting. "You're early," the woman said with a small smile. Elena blinked in surprise. "So are you." "Oh, I've always been an early riser," the woman replied. "Old habits. And I find the mornings here peaceful, before the day rushes in." Elena nodded, placing her music sheets on the stand. Her hands hovered above the keys. She felt the woman watching her, not judging, just present. "I heard you yesterday," the woman said. "You have a voice in your fingers. You just haven't learned to trust it yet." Elena swallowed. Compliments always felt like something she didn't know how to hold. She didn't want to drop them or ruin them. "Thank you," she whispered. She placed her fingers down and began to play. Slow at first, repeating scales, testing chords, building small melodies piece by piece. The room felt like a bubble around her. No noise, no judgment, just sound. She made mistakes. She corrected them. She made new mistakes. She breathed. She learned to keep going. At one point, the woman spoke again. "You know, my husband was a pianist," she said casually. "He used to say the piano doesn't care about perfection, cares about honesty. Play like you're telling the truth, even if the truth is shaky." Elena paused, absorbing the words. Then she nodded and tried again. By the time the rest of the staff arrived, she had played through 4 songs. Her fingertips felt tender. Her shoulders were tight, but she felt stronger, like someone had added a few bricks to her foundation. When breakfast service began, she returned to her normal duties: trays, orders, refills. The piano would wait until evening. Later that day, the hotel slowly transformed for dinner service. The lights dimmed, the tables gleamed, and soft conversation filled the air. The dining hall became a world again, the kind Elena served but never belonged to. "Not yet." The manager nodded at her. A signal. Elena sat at the piano. Her heart pounded. She took a breath and began. The first notes floated out, delicate as glass. She tried not to think of hands moving in slow arcs around the room, forks pausing midair, ears tuning in. She just played. Chords slipped. She recovered. She kept going. At table 3, a man looked up, startled, like he hadn't expected so much emotion from a melody so simple. At table 8, a woman smiled and whispered something to her partner. Table 1. A teenager recording a vlog paused and turned the camera toward the sound. Elena didn't notice every reaction, but she noticed enough. The music reached people. Maybe not all of them, but some. That was enough. For a while, it felt like the room and the piano were breathing together. Elena didn't look up. She couldn't. If she saw faces, the fear might return. So she focused on the keys, on the story her hands were trying to remember. Then, during her third piece, something unexpected happened. Someone clapped. Not loudly, not dramatically, just a soft, polite clap after she finished. Then another person joined. Then a few more. It wasn't applause like a concert, more like gentle encouragement, a nod to her effort. Elena froze. She hadn't expected any reaction. Her instinct was to shrink, to hide. But instead, she did something new. She lifted her head and smiled, small, but real. The manager, watching from the corner, did not smile. But his shoulders relaxed, and he nodded once, almost like permission. After the applause faded, she continued. She played gentler now, not because she was scared, but because she wanted the notes to linger. As the night went on, she grew tired. Playing and serving back-to-back drained her energy like nothing else. But she felt alive in a way that was worth the exhaustion. Near closing time, when the last guests were leaving, a couple approached her. The woman leaned forward slightly. "How long have you been playing?" she asked. "Since I was young," Elena answered. "But not for a long time until recently." "You should keep going," the woman said. "There's something here. Don't stop because it's hard." Elena nodded, the words sinking deep. After they left, she remained on the bench for a few minutes, flexing her hands. Her fingers tingled as if the keys had left their imprint. She closed her eyes and let the silence settle around her. Yara approached quietly and sat beside her. You did it, Yara said. Not really, Elena replied. I just played a little. That's how doing it starts, Yara said. A little at a time. They sat in comfortable silence. Elena didn't need more words. The moment spoke for itself. When she walked home that night, she felt taller. Not because anything magical had happened. Not because her life had changed suddenly. But because she had taken a step she once thought she couldn't. A step is not a leap. It is not a victory. It is not a finish line. But it is movement. And movement is how the story moves forward. That night, Elena lay in bed with tired arms and a restless mind. She replayed the music in her head and the rhythm of the compliments she had never expected to hear. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring. She didn't know if opportunities would come or if this would be her only moment. But for the first time, she didn't worry about that. She had played. She had been heard. And even if she wasn't perfect, she was something. Something real. Something becoming. As sleep pulled her in, she made a quiet promise to herself. Tomorrow I will play again. Elena woke up the next morning with an unusual feeling in her chest. Like music was sitting right next to her heartbeat. Not loud, but present. She stretched her fingers, flexing them like a dancer warming up their feet. Her arms ached from the long night, and her legs felt heavy from running between tables, but none of it dimmed the spark inside her. Her mom noticed it too. As Elena prepared breakfast, her mother watched her for a moment, eyes soft. You look different, she said. Elena paused. I played at the hotel, she said quietly. Just a little. Her mother nodded. Not surprised. Not shocked. Just proud in a way that didn't need words. You should keep going, she said simply. If it's what you want. Those words stayed with Elena the entire walk to work. They felt like permission. Not from the manager or the guests or the hotel, but from home, from the place where her story began. When she entered the hotel, she was greeted by Raphael, who was leaning against the reception counter with his music bag slung over his shoulder. He looked at her with raised eyebrows, like he already knew. I heard you played yesterday, he said. How did it feel? Elena exhaled. Terrifying, she admitted, but also, like breathing. Raphael smiled. That's how you know it matters. He didn't say more. He didn't need to. He simply walked toward the ballroom for his morning rehearsal. The manager approached her soon after with a new set of instructions. You will play again tonight, he said, checking his watch. Practice for 1 hour before the evening shift. Nothing too dramatic. Keep it simple. Our guests prefer familiar music. Elena nodded. The day passed in a blur of tasks. Polishing cutlery, arranging silverware, checking reservation lists. But underneath every step was the anticipation of the evening. This night was different. There was a charity dinner scheduled. A big event hosted by a foundation that helped provide scholarships for the arts. The kind of event where the guests weren't just wealthy. They were connected. People who knew producers, teachers, performers, school directors. People who could open doors or close them. The staff whispered about it all day. Nervous energy bouncing around like vibrations off the strings of a violin. They say a famous composer is coming, one server said. And a critic from a big magazine, another added. A conductor, too. From some orchestra that travels the world. The words sank into Elena's stomach like stones. She knew tonight would either lift her or break her. She didn't want either. She just wanted to play honestly, like the silver-haired woman had said. As the sun set, she sat at the piano for her practice. She played slowly at first, warming up, letting the sound teach her how to feel. The room was empty. No eyes, no pressure. Just her and the piano. She loosened her fingers and let them guide her. A melody formed, something she hadn't written or learned, but something she knew all the same. It grew like a branch growing leaves. Not perfect, but alive. She played it until she could breathe through it. Until the music didn't feel like something outside her, but something coming from her. When the first guests arrived, the piano was already glowing in the candlelight. The chandeliers reflected against its surface like constellations floating on black water. Elena took her seat. The manager gave a small nod. And she began. The first piece was familiar. A simple classical song she had practiced until her fingers knew it like a route home. It flowed gently into the room, settling like warmth on cold skin. Conversations softened. Glasses paused mid-rise. People leaned in without realizing it. Then came the second piece, the melody she created herself. Soft, then bold. Hesitant, then growing. Like courage learning to stand upright. A few people turned their chairs toward her. Not rudely, just curiously. The music filled the hall, curling into corners, bouncing off mirrors. Elena didn't look up. She didn't dare. She was afraid she might see a judgment that would make her hands freeze. Halfway through the song, she made a mistake. Just one note, too sharp, out of place. Her heart lurched. But this time she didn't panic. She remembered what the woman said. Play like you're telling the truth, even if the truth is shaky. So she turned the mistake into a change. She adjusted the melody. She made space for the wrong note, and suddenly it didn't feel wrong at all. Felt like intention, like choice. A quiet wave of reaction spread across the room. A shift, not in volume, but in energy. People who had been speaking stopped. People who had been watching the pianist as background focused. Then something else happened. A guest near the front, an older man with glasses, leaned forward, his eyes widening. He whispered something to the woman next to him, and she looked at Elena like someone discovering something precious. Another guest closed his eyes as he listened, tapping his fingers gently on the table in time with the rhythm. It was small, but Elena felt it, a shift in the air. Her hands moved faster now, like the piano was helping her, like the keys were catching her when she leaned too far. The sound grew not louder but deeper, more grounded, more like a voice than an instrument. She finished the piece on a soft note that lingered like a question hanging in the air. Silence followed, not the heavy silence of judgment, but the full silence of awe. Then, a sound Elena never expected. Applause. Not polite, not light, but real, hands coming together like gratitude, like surprise, like recognition. She blinked, stunned. Her chest tightened. She felt heat rise behind her eyes but forced herself not to cry. The applause didn't last long, but it was enough to mark the moment. Enough to tell her that something had changed. The manager stared at her like she had just rewritten the rules of the world without asking permission. Raphael watched from the doorway, a proud shadow leaning against the frame, nodding softly like he had always known this was inside her. Even the silver-haired woman was there, eyes shining like someone watching a bird take flight. Elena lowered her hands to her lap. She didn't bow. She didn't know how. She just sat there, breathing like she had never breathed before. For the rest of the evening, she played softer pieces. She didn't chase the high of applause. She didn't need to prove anything. The moment had already happened. People passed her as they left. Some said thank you. Some just smiled. Some didn't speak, but their eyes did. The older man with glasses approached her. He introduced himself as someone who worked with a music academy. Not a famous one, not a perfect one, but a real one. A place where people learned because they loved music, not because they were already brilliant at it. Come visit, he said, handing her a card. Let's see what you can do with guidance. Elena accepted the card with trembling fingers. She didn't look at the manager as she slipped the card into her apron, not because she didn't care what he thought, but because she finally knew what she thought. She wasn't waiting for anyone's permission anymore. After the restaurant closed, she stayed behind for a moment to clean the keys gently with a soft cloth. Not because she was told to, but because she wanted to, because respect matters. Raphael passed by on his way out. You know, he said, sometimes a person's life changes in a loud moment, but sometimes it changes in a quiet one. Tonight felt like both. Elena smiled. It did. He tipped his head, the closest thing to applause he could offer. Keep practicing. The world is bigger than this hotel. When she stepped out into the night, the city felt different. The air felt lighter. Even the pavement under her shoes felt like it carried possibility. She didn't want to run home. She wanted to walk slowly, so the night could sink in and stay with her. As she crossed the street, she heard something faint, familiar, impossible. Music. Not from a speaker, not from a car, but from inside her. It wasn't just a melody now. It was a future. The morning after the charity event felt unreal. Elena moved through her routine like a person learning how to walk again. Her brother watched her butter toast with the focus of a scientist. "You're smiling," he said, confused like it was a rare weather pattern. Elena blinked. She hadn't realized she was smiling. "I guess I am." Her mother sipped her tea and gave a tiny nod. She didn't ask for details. She didn't pry. But the way she reached across the table and briefly touched Elena's wrist said enough. The pride in her eyes was quiet, but Elena felt it like sunshine through curtains. At work, the atmosphere had changed too. Not loudly, not dramatically, but in the small ways that matter. The doorman held the door a second longer for her. The receptionist greeted her first instead of last. Yara waved like she already knew everything that had happened. Even the kitchen staff gave her a nod as she passed through to collect breakfast trays. Respect moves differently than attention. It doesn't shout. It steps aside and makes space. The manager approached her around noon. He didn't look uncomfortable, just uncertain, like he was trying to adjust to a new image of her. "Elena," he said, clearing his throat. "I've spoken to the hotel director about last night." Elena froze, waiting for the other shoe to drop. "The feedback from guests was positive," he continued, "and unexpected. Several asked if you will be performing again." He put his hands behind his back. "We have decided to let you continue playing on select evenings. Not every night. Your duties as a server remain, but you will have designated performance hours." The words landed slowly, like snow. Two worlds in one sentence. You can play. You still have to serve. But that was okay. Being in two places at once was how her life had always worked. "Thank you," she said. The manager nodded. "Make sure the standard stays high. If it drops, we will reconsider." There it was, the warning, the condition, the safety net made of rules. But even that didn't feel as heavy as before. "I understand," Elena said. He opened his mouth like he wanted to say something else. Maybe encouragement, maybe caution. But instead he simply gestured toward the dining hall. "The piano is free until 3 o'clock. You may practice now." It was the first time the word may felt like a gift. She practiced for hours, not to impress anyone, not to chase applause, just to grow note by note, fingertip by fingertip. She practiced until her shoulders ached and her back stiffened. Yara stopped by at one point and left a cup of warm water with lemon and honey next to her. "For your hands," she said, "and for your courage." Elena didn't know how to respond, so she just touched Yara's arm in thanks. Later that evening, guest after guest entered the restaurant like they always did. But today, their eyes drifted to the piano quicker. Not in the usual way, curious at best, dismissive at worst, but like they were checking if something extraordinary might happen again. The first hour passed quietly. Elena played gentle background pieces. Nothing bold, nothing risky. She was testing the ground, learning how to be heard without being intrusive. Then, halfway through her shift, something unexpected happened. A group of guests in sharp suits asked to speak to her. Elena wiped her hands and approached, bracing herself. One of them smiled. "We just wanted to say we attended the charity event last night. Your performance was refreshing. Honest. It reminded me why live music matters." Another added, "There was emotion in it. Real emotion. You can't teach that. You can only grow it." They handed her a business card, simple, elegant. It belonged to a local philanthropist who funded scholarships for underprivileged youth in the arts. "If you're interested," the first man said, "there are programs that could support you. Lessons, mentors, access to instruments. No promises, but possibilities." Possibilities. The word lit something inside her. Something she refused to smother this time. "I'm interested," she said. When they left, the manager looked at her from across the room. His expression was impossible to read. Not angry, not proud, just surprised. Like he was watching a story he didn't know he had a role in. Things at the hotel didn't magically become perfect. There were still rude customers. There were still nights when her fingers stumbled. There were still whispers from a few coworkers who didn't like change. One evening, another server muttered under their breath, "Just because she plays doesn't mean she's special." Elena heard it but didn't react. Not because it didn't hurt. It did. But instead of shrinking, she stored the comment in a quiet corner of her heart. Not as proof she shouldn't try, but as a reminder of why she should. People are uncomfortable when someone grows taller in front of them. It forces them to see their own shadows differently. A week passed, then 2, then 3. Elena learned how to balance 2 worlds, carrying plates in one hand and a dream in the other. She played during slow hours and served during busy ones. Sometimes guests asked for her by name. Other times they walked past her without noticing. Both moments mattered, because real progress is not applause. It is consistency. A month later, she finally called the number on the business card. Her voice shook, her palms sweated, but she called. A coordinator on the other end listened patiently as Elena explained her story. "We don't require perfection," the coordinator said. "We require effort. Do you have that?" Elena inhaled. "Yes," she said. "I do." They asked her to visit the academy for an assessment. She told the manager she needed one afternoon off for the appointment. He stared at her for a moment, then nodded. "Take it," he said. "Don't waste it." There was no softness in his voice. But for the first time, Elena felt the words land like support rather than control. The academy was smaller than she expected. Not grand, not polished, but warm, like a place where failure wasn't a full stop, just a comma. She sat at a piano in a small room with 2 instructors. They asked her to play anything. She chose the piece she made herself, the one with the mistake that turned into something real. Her hands trembled. She played anyway. When she finished, the room was silent for a few seconds. One of the instructors leaned forward. "How long have you been playing again?" he asked. "A few weeks," she said. "And before that?" "Years ago. I stopped." He nodded. "Don't stop again. You have work to do. But there's something here. Something worth shaping." They offered her a place in a weekend program. Not free, but funded through a scholarship that covered most of the costs. Lessons, practice rooms, peer support, performances. "And if you work hard," the instructor said, "there may be more opportunities later. You write your story as you go." Elena felt tears gather. She didn't hide them. Crying wasn't a weakness. It was proof that something mattered. "Thank you," she whispered. As she walked out of the academy, she didn't float. She didn't sprint. She walked, steady, like someone finally carrying her own name with both hands. That evening, she returned to the hotel for her shift. The manager looked up as she entered. "Well?" he asked. "They accepted me," she said. He paused, then nodded. "Good. Congratulations. Now hang your coat, we're short-staffed tonight. Table 7 needs water." It wasn't the reaction she expected, but it was real. That was enough. She served. She played. She worked. She learned. Little by little, her identity stretched to hold more than one truth. Waitress, pianist, student, beginner, believer. Not one or the other. All of them. Every time she sat at the piano now, she no longer played to prove she belonged. She played like she already did. Because belonging isn't something you wait for someone to grant you. Belonging is something you practice until you create it yourself. The morning of her first academy class felt like standing on the edge of a diving board. The ground behind her was familiar, solid, predictable, but ahead there was water she had never touched. She wasn't sure if she would sink or swim. She only knew she had to jump. She left home earlier than usual, holding her backpack like it contained more than sheet music and notebooks, like it carried her past and her future at the same time. Her mother stood at the door, tying her hair back with one hand, waving with the other. "Do your best," she called out. "That's all anyone can ask of you." Elena nodded. Her throat was too tight to answer. On the bus, She watched the city wake up around her. Bakeries rolling up their shutters. Students yawning at bus stops. Office workers walking fast. Phones already to their ears. Everyone was moving somewhere, chasing something. She wondered how many of them felt scared like she did. She wondered how many felt alive because of it. The academy building stood at the end of a quiet street. It didn't shine the way hotels did. It wasn't designed to impress. Its walls were lined with old posters for concerts and recitals, some edges curled from years of sunlight. But there was something warm about it, like a place where mistakes were allowed to breathe. Inside, the air smelled faintly of wood polish and paper. The receptionist handed her a schedule. "Welcome," she said. "Your class is in room 3. Down the hall, second door on the left." Elena nodded and walked toward her future in small, careful steps. Room 3 was filled with students of different ages. Some looked confident, balancing sheet music like armor. Others, like her, clutched their bags a little too tightly, unsure where to stand. A piano sat in the center like a lighthouse. The instructor, a man named Mr. Patel, greeted them with a kind voice. "This room is not about perfection," he said. "This room is about progress. Your mistakes are not evidence that you shouldn't be here. They are evidence that you are learning." Those words landed in Elena's heart like seeds finding soil. When it was her turn to sit at the piano, she hesitated. The room felt different from the hotel. There wasn't dim lighting to hide under. No background noise to blend with. Just her, the keys, and a circle of eyes waiting. She played her melody, the one she had shaped from a mistake. Her fingers shook, but they moved. Not perfectly, not fearlessly, but truthfully. When she finished, Mr. Patel didn't clap. He didn't need to. He leaned forward, thoughtful. "You have instinct," he said. "Your hands know how to tell a story. Our job is to teach them the language of music, so they can tell it even clearer." Another student raised their hand. "What does that mean? Isn't playing just pressing the right keys?" Mr. Patel smiled. "If that was all it took, pianos would play themselves. Music is not just about accuracy. It's about connection. Imagine the keys are doors. Anyone can open them, but not everyone invites people inside." Elena felt the words wrap around her, steadying her. During a break, she sat by the window with a sandwich from home, watching other students chat. One girl with braids and shy eyes approached her. "Your piece," the girl said. It felt like rain turning into sunlight. Elena blinked, surprised. "Thank you," she said quietly. The girl nodded. "I'm learning guitar. I'm terrible at it. But maybe terrible is still a start." "It is," Elena said. "It was for me too." They ate together in comfortable silence. After class, Elena returned to the hotel for her shift. The moment she stepped through the doors, she felt the worlds merge. Not as opposites, but as pieces of the same story. Yara greeted her with a grin. "So, how was the academy? Did they bow at your feet? Did they throw confetti?" "Please tell me there was confetti." Elena laughed for the first time that day. "No confetti, but it was good. Hard, but good." The manager overheard and approached. "If the academy affects your performance here," he said, "we will have to reevaluate." There was no threat in his tone, just rules. "Yes," Elena replied. "I understand, but I think this will help me perform better." He studied her for a moment, then nodded. "We'll see." It wasn't approval, but it wasn't doubt either. As the weeks passed, Elena's life found a new rhythm. Mornings at school, afternoons at the academy, evenings at the hotel, nights dreaming of music. She grew tired, sometimes so tired her hands shook when she held a tray. But when she sat at the piano, it felt like rest, even if it demanded everything of her. The silver-haired woman continued to visit. She always sat in the same seat, always ordered tea, always listened. One evening, as Elena packed up, the woman approached her. "You're changing," the woman said gently. "I don't mean the music. I mean you." Elena looked down at her hands. "I'm trying. That's all change ever asks," the woman replied. Trying. She reached into her purse and handed Elena a small, folded note. "Open it when you're ready," she said. Then she left. Elena waited until the next morning, sitting at the bus stop with cold air on her cheeks. She unfolded the note with careful fingers. Inside, in elegant handwriting, were 4 sentences. "A dream is not a destination. It is a direction. Walk it at your pace. The world will adjust." Elena closed her eyes and let the words settle like music. Months passed. Her playing improved, not perfectly, not magically, but steadily. She learned how to control her tempo, how to move through mistakes, how to tell a story with sound instead of words. One evening, a hotel guest who happened to be a music reviewer approached her. He had watched her play several times in silence. "You play like someone who has lived many chapters," he said. "Even if you're young. Would you allow me to write about you? Nothing sensational. Just honest." Elena hesitated. The idea frightened her. What if the world judged her? What if people laughed? What if she wasn't ready? But then she thought of Raphael's advice, of Mr. Patel's lessons, of the silver-haired woman's note. So she said, "Yes, if it's honest." He promised it would be. The article came out 2 weeks later. A small feature in a local arts column. A photograph of her at the piano, eyes lowered, fingers touching the keys like a secret. The title read, "The waitress who plays like the world is listening." Not dramatic, not exaggerated, just true. Customers began coming not just for the hotel's reputation, but because they wanted to hear her. Not all of them, not a crowd, but some. Some is all a beginning needs. The Academy offered her a performance opportunity for student showcases. Not a lead role, not a star position, but a place on stage. She accepted. At home, her brother wrapped his arms around her waist, hopping up and down with excitement. Her mother cried openly, not from sadness, but from relief, like she had been holding her breath for years. "You're building something," her mother whispered, piece by piece. Elena held her tightly. "I'm trying." Her mother shook her head. "No, you're doing." On the night of the student showcase, Elena stood backstage wearing the only dress she owned that wasn't a uniform. The fabric fluttered like her heartbeat. Before she walked out, Mr. Patel placed a hand on her shoulder. "Remember," he said, "you're not here to prove anything, just to share." Elena nodded. She stepped on stage. The lights were warm, not blinding. The faces in the audience were shapes, not judges. She sat at the piano and took a breath. The room was quiet. She began to play. This time, she didn't play small. She didn't play to blend into the background. She didn't play like she was waiting for permission. She played like her story deserved sound, like her hands had learned to speak, like the world might listen, and if it didn't, she would still speak anyway. Her melody grew. It rose. It soared. Not perfect, but alive. When she finished, the room didn't erupt. It wasn't applause like in movies. It was something better. A heartbeat of silence. Full, not empty. Then applause. Real. Human. Enough. Raphael was in the back, arms crossed, nodding. Yara was cheering too loud for the small hall. Her mother held her brother close, tears on her cheeks like joy learning to breathe. The silver-haired woman was there, clapping, eyes bright, like she had seen this coming all along. Elena stood. She didn't bow. She just smiled. A door didn't fling open that night. It didn't become easy. Nothing suddenly changed forever, but something unlocked, and she stepped through. Not into success, not into fame, not into perfection. She stepped into possibility, and that was more than enough.